Welcome back to High Stakes. Today, we will be discussing the following North Carolina AA football matches that is happening on Friday, September 1st, 2023. We will be providing our team, total and prop picks for the day. Before we get started, please remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. If you want access to our premium picks, you can check out our Patreon page. You can find the link to our Patreon page in the description and comments section below. Miami Redhawks vs Miami Hurricanes. Take the Hurricanes minus 15 points. And here is why. The Hurricanes ended the season having earned a 5-7 record. The last time they took the gridiron, the Hurricanes took a loss by a final score of 42-16 when they played the Pittsburgh Panthers. Jalen Knighton ran the ball 7 times for 72 yards, finishing the game with 10.3 yards per carry for Miami. Jake Garcia, 2 touchdowns, ended the contest with 192 yards on 17-28 through the air, while his quarterback rating was 141.9. He didn't toss any picks, and his YA was 6.9. Miami allowed 35 running attempts for 248 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. The Hurricanes secondary conceded a completion percentage of 64.3%, surrendering 256 yards on 18 for 28 passing. The Hurricanes finished with 385 yards, and they ran 66 plays, 5.8 yards per play. Miami ran for 3.9 yards per carry, finishing with a total of 106 yards on 27 attempts. The Miami Hurricanes averaged 367.1 yards per outing, which was good for 86th in college football. The Miami offense accrued 720 yards of penalties on 85 violations, which was 37th in Division I in terms of helping out the other team. For the previous season, the Hurricanes threw for a total of 2,868 passing yards, together with averaging 239.0 passing yards per outing, which ranked 60th in the country. Regarding the points being put on the board, the Hurricanes ranked 97th in Division I, holding an average of 23.6 ppg. Miami surrendered a total of 1,715 yards via the ground game, 142.9 yards per outing, and 18 touchdowns rushing last year. They conceded 20 touchdowns through the air, in addition to 233.6 yards outing, which put them in 80th in the country. The Hurricanes' defense took the field for 761 plays, which was good for 10th in Division I. The Hurricanes gave up 26.8 ppg, which put them in 69th in college football. In total, they conceded 322 total points. Our total pick is over. The Redhawks earned 3,973 total yards last season. Miami earned 16 touchdowns via the pass and 14 touchdowns on the ground. They gave the ball to the opposition 13 times. Miami earned 224 first downs offensively, and they were called for 72 infractions for 627 yards. As a team, they averaged 140.1 yards in the run game, which was 84th in college football. When it comes to scoring points, the Miami Redhawks averaged 20.2 points per outing. The Redhawks were ranked 35th in the nation concerning team defense, allowing 22.6 points per game. They allowed 3.9 yards per rushing attempt and 135.9 rushing yards per contest throughout last season. Over the course of last season, they conceded 1,767 rushing yards through 13 contests. When talking about passing yardage, the Redhawks allowed 3,084 yards, which had them ranked 87th in the nation. Over the course of their 13 games played, they gave up 237.2 yards per contest via the pass, as well as relinquishing a completion percentage of 61.4%. They surrendered 373.2 yards per game, which had them ranked 62nd in college football. They gave up 17 touchdowns through the air, as well as 17 touchdowns via the ground game. Central Michigan Chippewas vs Michigan State Spartans. Take the Chippewas, and here is why. The Central Michigan Chippewas wrapped up their year having a 4-8 record. In their last matchup, the Chippewas played the Eastern Michigan Eagles and ended up losing by a score of 38-19. Bird Emanuel Jr. led the offense in rushing for the Chippewas with 16 carries for 75 yards, 4.7 yards per attempt. Jace Bauer connected on 7/15 with 68 yards through the air. He had a quarterback rating of 44.7 and ended the game with 3 interceptions. On the ground, the Chippewas gave up 171 yards on 42 tries, which calculates to 4.1 yards per run allowed. Central Michigan gave up 24 completions on 36 attempts for 266 yards and a completion rate of 66.7%. At the end of the game, they tallied 53 plays which converted into 229 yards. The Central Michigan Chippewas ran the rock 36 different times and tallied 161 yards, which had them averaging 4.5 yards per tote. In terms of scoring, the Central Michigan Chippewas held an average of 24.8 points per outing. As a team, they had an average of 159.2 yards in the run game, which ranked them 61st in D1. The Chippewas earned 4,408 total yards for the prior season. Central Michigan amassed 16 touchdowns via the pass and 22 rushing touchdowns. Central Michigan tallied 242 first downs offensively, and they were called for 84 penalties for 758 yards. They surrendered the ball 28 times. The Chippewas sat in 80th in the nation when it comes to the opposition scoring, giving up 28.2 points per game. The opposition ran for an average of 3.8 yards per rush and 149.6 yards on the ground per game throughout last season. In total, they allowed 1,795 running yards through 12 contests. Regarding passing yards, the Chippewas conceded 2,678 yards, which had them ranked 44th in D1. In their 12 games played, they gave up 223.2 yards per game through the air, as well as allowing a completion percentage of 59.4%. They surrendered 372.8 yards per outing, ranking them 61st in the nation. They allowed 22 touchdowns via the pass and 20 rushing touchdowns. Our total pick is over. And here is why. The Spartans wrapped up their season having earned a 5-7 record. The last time they took the field, the Spartans took a defeat with a final score of 35-16 when they played the Penn State Nittany Lions. Peyton Thorne, 1 TD, walked away from the contest with 229 yards on 24 43rds passing, while his quarterback rate was 103.6. He tossed 1 interception, and his YA was 5.3. Elijah Collins carried the ball 10 times for 33 yards, finishing the game with 3.3 yards per carry for Michigan State. Michigan State ran the football for 1.0 yards per carry, finishing the game with 25 yards on 25 attempts. The Spartans ended up finishing with 254 yards, and they ran 69 plays, 3.7 yards per play. The Spartans' passing defense gave up a completion percentage of 80.0%, surrendering 250 yards on 20 out of 25 through the air. Michigan State gave up 45 rushing attempts for 160 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. Stanford Cardinal vs Hawaii Warriors. Take the Warriors plus 10 points. And here is why. The Warriors ended the season having earned a 3-10 record. The last time they took the field, the Warriors took a loss by a final score of 27-14 against the San Jose State Spartans. Dedrick Parson ran the ball 12 times for 28 yards, finishing the contest with 2.3 yards per carry for Hawaii. Braden Shager, 1 touchdown, ended the game with 230 yards on 25 45ths passing, while his QB rating was 105.8. He didn't toss any picks, and his average yards per pass attempt was 5.1. Hawaii conceded 40 attempts on the ground for 191 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. The Warriors' passing defense conceded a completion percentage of 65.4%, relinquishing 208 yards on 17 for 26 passing. The Warriors finished the game with a total of 273 yards, and they ran 71 plays, 3.8 yards per play. Hawaii ended up running for 1.7 yards per attempt, finishing with 43 yards on 26 carries. When looking at how much they scored, the Warriors were ranked 115th in the country, averaging 19.8 points per game. Last year, the Warriors had a total of 2,672 yards via the pass, not to mention an average of 205.5 passing yards per game, which was ranked 100th in the country. The Hawaii Warriors held an average of 342.8 yards per game, which had them sitting 104th in Division I. The Hawaii offense had 653 yards of penalties on 73 infractions, which ranked 79th in the country in terms of hurting your team. Hawaii allowed a total of 2,765 yards via the ground game, 212.7 yards game, in addition to 29 touchdowns on the ground throughout last season. They allowed the opposition 21 touchdowns from the passing game and 224.8 yards per game, which put them in 66th in the nation. The Warriors' defense participated in 863 plays, which was good for 64th in Division I. The Warriors relinquished 34.7 ppg, which had them ranked 123rd in the country. In total, they relinquished 451 total points. Our total pick is over. And here is why. The Cardinal tallied 4,339 yards in total last season. Stanford totaled 16 touchdowns through the air and 14 touchdowns via the ground. They gave the ball to the opposition 22 different times. Stanford accrued 250 first downs as an offense, and they committed 55 infractions for 496 yards. As a team, they had an average of 107.3 yards on the ground, ranking them 117th in the country. Regarding putting points on the board, the Stanford Cardinal had an average of 21.3 points per contest. When it comes to passing yards, the Cardinal allowed 2,516 yards, which had them ranked 24th in the country. During their 12 games played last year, they allowed 209.7 yards per contest via the pass, as well as relinquishing a completion percentage of 57.7%. They surrendered 434.1 yards per game, which ranked them 114th in college football. They gave up 22 passing touchdowns, in addition to 25 touchdowns on the ground. They allowed teams to run for an average of 6.1 yards per rushing attempt and 224.4 yards on the ground per game last year. For the year, they allowed 2,693 running yards through 12 games. The Cardinal ranked 113th in the country regarding team defense, conceding 32.2 ppg.